This is a Squiz Kids podcast. Your fresh take on what's happening in the world around you.
They come out to play every Halloween. Only 2% of animal species have them, and without them, humans just wouldn't be human. This is your Squiz Kids shortcut to skeletons, the podcast where we dive into the who, what, when, where, why, and how of the big news stories. I'm Amanda Bauer.
And I'm Bryce Corbett.
Bryce, I don't know about you, but I love Halloween.
Oh yeah.
Any excuse to dress up.
That's right.
And every Halloween, you are sure to see skeletons.
Yes.
Of course, it's pure fiction that a skeleton could ever walk around without a brain to control it, nerves to send messages from the brain, and of course muscles, ligaments and tendons to receive those messages and move the bones.
Which is a good thing. I mean, I don't like the idea of a real skeleton walking around by itself.
No.
A kid in a skeleton costume, no problem. Now, today, we'll take you through what our skeletons do, why babies have more bones than adults, and how we can take care of our skeletons.
Listen carefully, there's a squiz at the end.
What?
So Bryce, what do you think skeletons do? I'll give you some spooky Halloween music to think to.
Okay.
And Squiz Kids, you have a think to. You may even want to pause the podcast to share your ideas. Okay, Bryce, what have you got?
Yeah, let's see. Well, our skeletons hold us up. Without a skeleton, we just collapse into a skin bag filled with organs and muscles and other goop.
That's absolutely true and quite the mental image, your skin bag. What else do they do?
Well, if I put my hand where my heart is, on the left-hand side of my chest, I feel my ribs. Now, those bones are protecting my heart, aren't they?
Correct again. Doctors often divide the skeleton into two parts, and the one that gives us protection is called the axial skeleton.
Right.
It starts at your skull.
Yep.
And it travels down to include your ribs and spine, and some people also include your pelvis.
Okay.
So there are about 80 bones involved,
Yep.
and they protect your brain, of course, your spinal cord,
Yep.
which is sending all the messages from your brain to the rest of your body.
Yep, very important.
And most of your important organs, like your heart and your lungs.
Okay, so what's left are basically the arms and the legs, correct?
Yep, that's called your appendicular skeleton. So appendicular comes from the word appendage, which means arms or legs.
Right.
You know, Bryce, doctors love to use really long words for pretty simple things.
Yes, they do.
Anyway, the appendicular skeleton's main job is to move us around using our joints.
And joints, of course, are where bones join up, right?
That's right. And we have 360 different joints in our body.
Wow.
They don't all work the same way though, Bryce.
Okay.
So I'm guessing that Flynn has left a rugby ball lying around somewhere. Why don't you give it a big kick?
Okay, here we go. Woohoo! Through for a conversion.
Don't you love fantasy football?
Yeah, all in my head.
Now, Bryce, your knee joint is the reason you're able to kick that ball.
Okay.
It's called a hinge joint because it's like a hinge on a door.
Right.
Now, you can only open a hinged door in one direction and you can only move your knee joint in one direction.
Yeah, no way I can bend my knee up towards my head.
No. But when you celebrated that conversion by waving your arms in the air, you were able to swing your arm all the way around.
Oh, yeah.
And that's because you have a different kind of joint in your shoulder.
Right.
That's called a ball and socket joint because the head of your upper arm bone is ball-shaped and it fits into a kind of bowl-shaped bone in your shoulder.
So our bones hold us up, they protect us, and they allow us to move.
And our bones are also a factory that makes our blood. Inside our bones is our bone marrow, and that produces the white blood cells we need to fight infection, the red blood cells that we need to carry oxygen, and the platelets we need to stop us bleeding if we get a cut.
Oh!
Ouch!
The adult skeleton is made up of 206 very busy bones.
Now, I noticed you said adult skeleton there, Amanda. Why do kids have more bones than adults?
Why?
Your skeleton starts forming about 3 months into your growing in your mum's uterus.
Okay.
But it doesn't finish that process until you're older.
Oh.
For example, there's a bone called the sacrum.
Yep.
It's at the bottom of our spine and it connects to our pelvis. Now,
Yep.
Bryce, in you and me, the sacrum is one big bone that's shaped a bit like a shield.
Yeah.
But in a baby, it's 5 separate bones.
What?
Over time, they fuse together to form that one big bone. So when they're born, babies have around 300 parts to their skeletons compared with the
Wow.
206 that you and I have.
That's amazing. Now, I remember when my kids were born, we had to be extra careful of their heads because there were gaps between the skull bones, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So those gaps are there to make it easier for that baby's head to be born.
Right.
And then once they're out, the skull bones start growing and fusing together.
I see.
Once you've put that skull jigsaw together, there's only one bone left in your skull that can actually move. Can you guess which one, Bryce?
Let me just have a sip of my coffee while I think.
Okay, let me give you a clue. How were you able to just say that and drink your coffee?
Well, I guess that's because my lower jaw has a joint that allows it to move.
Yep, exactly. Now, Bryce, believe it or not, there is only one bone in your whole body that isn't connected to another bone.
What? Which one?
Well, it's called the hyoid bone.
Yeah.
It's horseshoe-shaped
Yes.
and muscles hold it in your throat.
Oh.
It's a really important bone. It's what allows us to move our tongues around. So next time you swallow or you speak or you stick your tongue out at someone, you can say thanks to your hyoid bone.
Thank you, hyoid bone. Now, that is an important bone, although I suspect they're probably all pretty crucial. How do we take care of our 206 bones?
How?
So have you ever heard of the bone disease osteoporosis?
Oh, yes. My grandmother had that. It's a disease that weakens your bones, and if you fall, there's a good chance that they'll break.
Yeah, that's it. So some doctors actually call osteoporosis a childhood disease with adult consequences.
Yeah.
So that's because when you're a kid, your bones are growing, and how well they grow when you're a kid affects whether you'll end up with osteoporosis when you're old and grey.
So what do we need to do now to make sure that we have good bones when we get older?
Well, doctors say that the 2 most important bone health habits, which is what they call it, are proper nutrition and plenty of physical activity. So physical activity is obvious.
Yeah.
And when they're talking about nutrition, the bone foods are ones that contain lots of calcium and vitamin D. So we're talking dairy, soybeans, leafy greens, salmon, baked beans. I'll put a list in your episode notes, but weirdly, figs are on that list. They apparently have a ton of calcium and vitamin D.
Who knew? It's also important to get a little sunlight to activate that vitamin D in your diet. Now, we all know that too much sun is a problem, but too little sunlight can be problematic too. Humans and other animals with skeletons, called vertebrates, make up only 2% of the animal kingdom. So our bones are really special and very definitely worth taking care of.
I'll eat a fig to that.
Time for the quiz.
This is the part of the podcast where you get to test how well you've been listening. Question number 1. What does the axial skeleton do? Yeah, that's right. It protects your brain and other important things in your body.
Question number 2. What makes the hyoid bone special? That's right, it's the only bone in our body not connected to another bone.
Question number 3. What are the 2 things we need to do to take care of our bones? Yeah, well done if you remembered this one. We've got to exercise and we've got to make sure we eat calcium and vitamin D.
That's all we have time for today. Thanks for joining us as we explored the who, what, how, where, when, and why of skeletons.
Now get out there.
And have a most excellent Halloween.
Over and out. These episodes are edited and engineered by Carter Quinn.